It was just past midnight when the knock came. He had thought he got away with it. For years, he had lived with the quiet certainty that no one would ever know the truth. But there, standing on the doorstep, was a woman he thought was dead. A woman he buried with his own hands. She wasn't a ghost. She wasn't some hallucination. She was real, standing in front of him, as alive as she had been the day he first met her. The woman he had killed, Rebecca, was back. Charles stood frozen, his breath caught in his throat. His mind raced in disbelief. She couldn't be here. He had watched the dirt fall over her body. He had heard the last rasp of her breath. How was this possible? What was happening? Another knock, louder this time, echoed through the house, and Charles stumbled back, gripping the edge of the doorframe as though the very air itself was trying to escape him. It can't be her. He forced himself to take a step forward, his feet moving almost of their own accord. His pulse thundered in his ears as his trembling hand reached for the door handle. Something wasn't right. His breath quickened. His mind couldn't process what was happening. Through the peephole, he saw her. There she was, alive, standing in the dim light, her eyes locking with his. He staggered back again, his body rigid, as his heart raced in a way that made him feel like it might burst from his chest. Rebecca. The woman he had buried. The woman he thought he had killed. The woman he had left for dead. Her faint smile barely lifted the corners of her lips. She tilted her head slightly, and with a voice that was soft but piercing, she whispered, "Hey, baby." Charles couldn't breathe. His hands gripped the doorframe, trying to steady himself, but the world around him began to spin. This can't be happening. Rebecca took a step closer, her smile unchanging. "Miss me, Chuck." Charles staggered back, his mind spiraling as the world seemed to collapse around him. He had buried her. He had buried her. But there she stood, the woman he had thought was lost forever, alive. The life he had built, the lies he had carefully woven, the new beginning he thought he was living, all of it was about to come crashing down. Welcome to the Inside Crime Mind. If you're watching right now, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. More jaw-dropping true stories are on the way. It was a warm summer evening when Charles and Rebecca first met, the sun dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. They had crossed paths at a mutual friend's party, a casual gathering that had turned into something unforgettable. Charles stood in the corner of the room, his eyes scanning the crowd, when they met. Rebecca was leaning against the porch railing, laughing at something someone had just said. Her smile was radiant, genuine, untouched by the weight of life. Charles, always the charmer, walked over, his eyes never leaving her. He introduced himself, his voice smooth, confident. He asked her about her job, her hobbies, the things that made her smile. She felt drawn to him instantly, his magnetic presence making her feel as if they had known each other forever. The chemistry between them was undeniable. There was a fire in Charles's eyes, an intensity that was hard to ignore. He spoke of dreams, big ones. Of building something from nothing, of creating a life full of success and adventure. Rebecca listened, captivated by his words, his ambition. He promised her a life filled with excitement, stability, and love, and for a moment, it felt like nothing could go wrong. By the end of the evening, he had swept her off her feet. His charm had made her feel special in a way no one else had. They spoke for hours, talking about everything and nothing. It felt right, and the promise of a beautiful future together seemed almost too perfect to be true. They moved quickly, too quickly, perhaps. But Rebecca didn't mind. Charles made her feel like the center of his world. He called her every day, made spontaneous plans, showered her with affection. It was everything she had ever wanted. For the first time in a long time, she felt like someone truly saw her, understood her. They were a power couple in the making. Charles, with his confidence and charm, and Rebecca, with her quiet strength and intelligence. They built their lives together, an apartment, shared dreams, long weekends away, and the sense that nothing could tear them apart. She trusted him completely. But trust, like everything else, is fragile. It started small, almost imperceptible. At first, it was just a late night here or there, a meeting, he said. Then it became more frequent. He'd disappear on weekends, and when she asked, he'd tell her it was work. Rebecca, ever trusting, believed him. But something in her gut began to twist. She noticed the little things, the lipstick stains on his shirts, the stray hair on his collar. A fleeting moment when she caught him texting someone in secret, the conversation stopping abruptly when she walked into the room. She tried to ignore the nagging feeling. But it grew louder. One evening, when she was cleaning out his office, she found a receipt for a hotel in a city he hadn't mentioned. The name of the woman on the receipt was unfamiliar. He wasn't just working late. He wasn't just out of town for business. Rebecca confronted him that night. Charles's reaction was swift and smooth, too smooth. He gave her a charming smile, brushed it off with ease, telling her it was nothing, just a misunderstanding. "You're the only one I love, Rebecca. Don't you trust me?" His voice was calm, convincing, even affectionate. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to. But a seed had been planted, and the cracks began to widen. She asked questions, dug deeper, and found more lies, more hidden truths. She confronted him again and again, each time thinking that this time he would come clean. But Charles knew how to deflect, how to charm his way out of it. His assurances became more frequent, but the lies grew larger, harder to ignore. Rebecca's trust in him began to erode, piece by piece. She started to question everything he said, every gesture, every word. His promises of a bright future felt empty now, tainted by his dishonesty. He had become someone she didn't recognize. She saw glimpses of the man she once loved, the man who could make her laugh, who shared her dreams, but it felt distant, like a memory of someone long gone. And still, she stayed. She stayed because she didn't know how to walk away. Because she had given so much of herself to this man, to their relationship, that leaving felt like an admission of failure. Because despite everything, a part of her still believed in the man he once was. But as the lies mounted and the betrayal became harder to ignore, Rebecca began to see the truth. The man she had fallen in love with was not the man she had married. Charles had become someone else, a stranger who hid behind charm, control, and lies. And deep down, Rebecca knew that her marriage, the life they had built together, was unraveling. The love she once thought was unshakable was now fractured beyond repair. And no matter how hard she tried to fix it, she couldn't change him. Charles was never going to change. The days felt longer now, as if time itself was dragging its feet, unwilling to move forward. Rebecca's mind was constantly occupied, a whirlwind of doubts, fears, and unanswered questions. She had once believed that love could fix anything, but now, she wasn't so sure. It was like trying to hold together broken pieces of glass. No matter how carefully she tried, they always slipped from her hands, cutting deeper each time. Every night, she found herself lying awake, staring at the ceiling, consumed by the weight of the lies she had uncovered. She had stopped asking him about the late nights and the hotel receipts. The excuses had become too predictable, too rehearsed. She could see the guilt in his eyes when he spoke, but he never admitted the truth. He would apologize, say it was a mistake, and then move on, as if nothing had happened. The emotional toll was exhausting. She felt like she was drowning in her own doubts, struggling to keep afloat in a relationship that had long since sunk. Every conversation felt like an emotional minefield, one wrong step and everything would explode. But somehow, Charles always knew how to calm the storm. His smooth words were like balm to her wounded soul. "You're overreacting," he'd say. "You know I love you. This is just a phase." Rebecca wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. But as the days passed, the cracks in their relationship grew wider. There were moments when she felt like she was living with a stranger. He had become so good at hiding the truth, so skilled at manipulating the situation, that Rebecca often questioned if she was the one at fault. Maybe it was all in her head. Maybe she was just being paranoid, insecure, overreacting. The emotional manipulation became more subtle, more insidious. Charles knew exactly how to make her feel responsible for everything. When she would try to bring up the state of their relationship, he would turn the conversation around. "I'm doing all this for us, Rebecca," he'd say. "I'm just trying to make things better. Why can't you see that? Why can't you just be happy?" She would feel the familiar pang of guilt in her chest, the suffocating pressure of his expectations. It was always the same. He would make her feel like she was the problem, the one who was demanding too much, the one who was ungrateful for the life he had provided. It was exhausting, this constant emotional tug-of-war. Rebecca would retreat, silence her thoughts, and once again try to patch up the cracks with the fragile glue of hope. But hope had become a lie. She had known for months now that Charles was never going to change. Yet, the idea of leaving him, of walking away, felt impossible. It was more than just fear, it was the loss of everything she had invested. The future they had promised, the life they had built together. She couldn't just throw that away, could she? Rebecca had tried, countless times, to break free. There had been moments, small windows of clarity, where she felt like she had reached the edge, like she was finally going to walk away. The decision would be made in the quiet of the night when Charles was asleep, his heavy breathing a reminder of the distance between them. She would imagine the life she could have without him, a life where she wasn't walking on eggshells, where she could breathe without the weight of his betrayal hanging over her. But then he would wake up. And with him, the charm, the sweet words, the promises. "Rebecca, you can't leave me. You're everything to me. You know that, right?" he would say, his voice low and soothing. "I'll do anything to make it right. Just give me another chance. We'll fix everything. Please, just don't leave." And just like that, the resolve she had built would begin to crumble. She would remember the man she once loved, the man she had trusted, and for a fleeting moment, she would believe him again. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time, he really would change. But deep down, she knew the truth. The fear that had been festering in the back of her mind now consumed her completely. If she stayed, nothing would ever change. If she left, she would be walking away from the life she had known, the man she had loved, even if he was no longer the person she thought he was. It was a fear that gripped her heart, a fear of losing everything she had worked for. A fear of being alone. A fear of being weak for not having the strength to walk away. But even more terrifying than that fear was the thought that maybe, just maybe, she had already lost herself. Charles had spent years making her doubt her own instincts, questioning her reality, manipulating her every emotion. And now, Rebecca was trapped in her own mind, unsure of what was real and what was just another layer of his deceit. The emotional toll had reached its breaking point. Every day felt like a battle, a war of words, a war of hearts. And as the tension between them mounted, Rebecca knew that something had to give. The fight to stay, to keep everything intact, was draining her. But no matter how many times she tried to leave, she couldn't escape the feeling that she was locked in this relationship by a chain she couldn't break. In the silence of their home, in the moments when Charles wasn't there, Rebecca would sit and wonder. How much longer can I keep doing this? How much longer before I break completely? And then, she would look at him, her husband, and for a moment, she would wonder, what have I become? The evening had started like any other attempt at reconciliation, charming and full of false promises. Charles had insisted on a quiet dinner at home, just the two of them. He had promised to fix everything. His voice was smooth, a hint of regret just beneath the surface, convincing Rebecca that maybe, just maybe, they could start over. He cooked. He was always a good cook, she had to give him that. The smell of garlic and rosemary filled the house, mingling with the rich scent of the wine he had poured for them. The table was set beautifully, as if nothing had changed. The soft glow of the candles flickered against the evening shadows, creating an illusion of calm. Charles had made sure to play the part. He smiled at her, laughed at her jokes, and held her hand across the table. We can fix this, Rebecca. I've realized what I've done, and I swear I'll change. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. We'll get through this, together. Rebecca wanted to believe him. She wanted to hear the sincerity in his voice and feel the warmth of the man she once loved. She wanted the life they had promised each other back. But deep down, she knew. This wasn't real. It was just another act. Another round of promises that would never be kept. As they ate, she noticed the same things she always did, the little ways he controlled the conversation, the way he seemed to dominate every moment. She tried to push it aside, tried to focus on the possibility of change, but the unease gnawed at her. They began talking about the future, how they could make things right, fix the financial mess he had created, start fresh. But it didn't take long for the conversation to turn. The weight of their mounting debts, the second mortgage, the credit cards maxed out to their limit, Rebecca couldn't ignore it anymore. Her fear, the years of being ignored, manipulated, and lied to, bubbled up, and she couldn't stay quiet. Charles, I can't do this anymore, she said, her voice trembling slightly but firm. You've lied to me for too long. You've spent money we didn't have, lied about where you were, about who you were with. I can't pretend this is okay. I'm filing for divorce. I'm leaving. For a moment, the room was silent, the soft clink of silverware the only sound breaking the tension. Charles's face tightened. His smile faded, but there was something more than anger, something colder in his eyes. Rebecca saw it, but she couldn't look away. You're leaving. His voice was eerily calm, a dangerous edge creeping in. He leaned forward, his gaze sharp. You think you can just walk away from me? From everything we built? Rebecca's heart raced, but she held her ground. Yes. You've broken everything. I can't stay in this. Charles stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. His eyes darkened, and he started pacing the room. You think you're the only one who's been hurt, huh? You think this is easy for me? After everything I've done for you? He stopped, turning to face her. You think you'll just take half of everything I've worked for? You're wrong, Rebecca. You're wrong if you think you can just walk away and leave me with nothing. You won't take anything from me. Rebecca's throat tightened, her body instinctively recoiling. She knew where this was going, but she couldn't stop it. His voice had risen now, each word sharper, more dangerous. His usual charm was gone, replaced by something dark and volatile. The man she had known was slipping away, and in his place stood someone she barely recognized. You're nothing without me, Charles continued, his voice low and venomous. You think you can just leave me and take everything? I'll make sure you regret that. Rebecca stood up, her hand trembling as she pushed back from the table. "I don't care anymore, Charles. I'm done. I'm leaving." In a flash, everything changed. Charles lunged forward, his hand grabbing her wrist with terrifying force. She tried to pull away, but his grip tightened like a vice. "Not so fast, Rebecca." The word sent a chill down her spine, and before she could react, he pulled something from his jacket, a gun. Her breath caught in her throat. "Charles, what?" Her voice broke, the words caught in the back of her throat. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. The gunshot echoed in the room, sharp and deafening. Rebecca gasped, feeling a searing pain explode through her shoulder. Her vision blurred, and she staggered back, a strangled cry escaping her lips. The world tilted as she stumbled, but she wasn't dead. She couldn't be. Charles's face was blank, cold. He didn't move. Didn't say anything. It was as if he was waiting for her to collapse, waiting for her to stop breathing. But she didn't. She couldn't. Rebecca struggled, her legs buckling beneath her. The pain in her shoulder was unbearable, but it wasn't enough to stop her. She reached for him, for the man who had betrayed her, the man she had trusted with her life. Her body was shaking, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached out with trembling fingers, but Charles took a step back. Without a word, he shot her again. This time, the pain exploded in her stomach, sharp and brutal. The breath left her body in a gasp. She collapsed to the ground, the world spinning around her. She could barely move, could barely breathe. Her body felt heavy, each breath a laborious effort. But it wasn't over. With methodical precision, Charles dragged her body outside, his hands cold and unfeeling as they gripped her by the arms. The grass was wet beneath her, her blood staining the ground, but he didn't care. He pulled her through the darkened yard, his footsteps the only sound. The air was thick with the smell of dirt and decay as he reached the spot he had already chosen, an empty patch in the woods, far from anyone who could find her. It was here, under the weight of the earth, that he would leave her. The woman he had once loved, the woman he had destroyed. Charles dropped her body into the shallow grave he had already dug. The sound of dirt hitting her skin was the last thing Rebecca heard before darkness took over. As he shoveled dirt over her, his movements slow, deliberate, Rebecca's mind swam in a sea of pain. Her body screamed, but there was nothing left to fight with. As the final layer of earth covered her, Charles stood above her, his breath shallow, his eyes empty. He was done. And the world would never know what had really happened. Rebecca woke up to a weight she couldn't comprehend. It wasn't the weight of sleep, nor the heavy comfort of rest. It was something darker, more suffocating. Her body was pinned beneath a mass of earth, the dirt pressing against her skin like 1,000 invisible hands, holding her down. The air was thick, stale. It felt wrong, unnatural. Every instinct in her screamed, "This isn't right. You're not supposed to be here." But she couldn't remember how she got here. Her head ached, a dull throb that worsened with each breath. She tried to move, but her limbs felt like lead. Her fingers twitched, but they barely responded. Panic flooded her chest. She was disoriented, confused. The world was dark, suffocatingly dark. Her mouth opened to scream, but no sound came. She could barely draw breath, the air thin and stale, suffocating her from every angle. She tried again, her lungs aching for air, but all she got was a mouthful of dirt. Her mind spun, desperately clawing at the fragments of her memory, but they were elusive, slipping further away the harder she tried to reach them. Where am I? What happened? Then it came back, an explosion of pain, of terror, of disbelief. The sharp sting of the gunshot in her shoulder. The second shot, the agony in her stomach. Her body collapsing, the world spinning into blackness. The cold, distant hands of Charles pulling her, dragging her, through the yard, to this place. He buried me. Her heart pounded. It felt like the world was closing in, suffocating her from all sides. The weight of the earth above her was like a cruel joke, pressing into her skin with every shallow breath she took. She tried to scream again, but nothing came out. No one would hear her. Desperation clawed at her chest. She needed to move. She needed to get out. The fear wrapped around her heart, tight and suffocating. She was running out of time. If she didn't act, she would die here, alone in the cold, suffocating dirt. Her fingers twitched again, the only part of her that seemed to still be working. She couldn't see anything, but she could feel the dirt, the heavy weight of it pressing down on her body. The sharp, rough edges scraped against her skin as she tried to push, tried to move. Her arms burned with effort, the muscles screaming in protest. Think. Think, Rebecca. You can do this. With a primal scream that only she could hear, Rebecca shoved her hands into the dirt above her head. The cold, gritty earth scratched at her fingertips, but she didn't stop. She dug, her fingers tearing at the soil, pulling it away from her face. The air was thick, and every breath felt like a battle. She gasped for air, her chest heaving with effort. Her heart pounded in her ears. Every movement felt like lifting a mountain, but she couldn't stop. She refused to stop. She clawed harder. Her nails broke against the soil, her fingers raw, bloodied, but she kept going. She had no idea how deep she was buried, no sense of time or space. All she knew was that if she stopped, if she let go, she would die here. She couldn't let that happen. The darkness seemed endless. Her body screamed, but she didn't listen. Every ounce of her being focused on one goal, survival. The ground around her was soft, loose in some places and compact in others. The dirt shifted as she pulled it away from her face, her body slowly inching upward, the pressure building as the earth seemed to push against her with every movement. But she didn't stop. Her hands scraped against the rough soil, her breath coming in ragged, desperate gasps. And then, finally, she felt it. A small space, a pocket of air. The tiniest trickle of relief. Air. I can breathe. She clawed harder, desperation fueling her every movement. Her arms burned, her entire body screamed in exhaustion, but she wasn't going to stop now. Not when she could almost taste freedom. The dirt loosened more easily now, her fingers finding purchase in the earth as she dug her way through the layers above her. And then, in a sudden, violent rush, she broke through. The earth shifted around her, and with one final push, she emerged, her body half in, half out of the shallow grave. She gasped for air, her chest heaving as she pulled herself up, trembling violently. Her body was covered in dirt, blood staining her clothes, but she didn't care. She was alive. She was breathing. Rebecca looked around, her vision blurred from the effort, her body weak, but she was alive. The memories were clearer now. The betrayal. The gunshots. Charles. He had buried her alive. Her heart thundered in her chest as the gravity of the situation settled in. She wasn't just fighting for survival. She was fighting for something bigger now. The truth. She had to make it out of here, had to find a way to expose the man who had done this to her. She couldn't let him get away with it. But first, she had to survive. Rebecca staggered to her feet, every step a struggle, her legs trembling beneath her. She had no idea where she was, but she knew one thing, she couldn't stay here. She had to get away. She stumbled forward, her body dragging her with a strength she didn't know she had left. Each step was harder than the last, the world spinning around her, but she kept moving. The night was silent, save for the distant sound of crickets and the pounding of her heart. And then, headlights. A car, coming down a lonely road. She waved her arms weakly, the strength barely left in her to do so. She collapsed onto the road, her vision fading to black once again. The world spun away from her, but this time, she wasn't giving up. She couldn't. Not now. Rebecca's journey back to herself was not a straight path. It wasn't just the miles of desert roads or the hours spent in pain-filled delirium, but the raw, deep, suffocating truth of what had happened to her, what Charles had done. She didn't know how long she had been unconscious, but every minute of her recovery felt like a lifetime. Her body ached in places she didn't know could hurt, but it was the mental anguish that gnawed at her the most. She wasn't sure where she was at first, or even how long it had been since she had clawed her way out of that shallow grave. Her vision had been blurry, her mind clouded with confusion, and it was only when she had stumbled across that deserted road that she realized the extent of her survival. A car had stopped, the driver a stranger who had rushed her to the hospital. They had been kind, offering her water and comfort, but they didn't understand, none of them did. Rebecca's memories began to return, slowly at first. Images of Charles's face, his cold eyes, the manipulation, and the lies. But more vividly, she recalled the moment he had pulled the trigger, the horror of realizing that he had buried her alive. The helplessness she had felt when she was lying in the dirt, unable to scream or move, consumed her. It was a nightmare she would never escape. But now, she was awake. She was breathing. And she would make him pay. It wasn't just survival. It was justice. Rebecca knew what she had to do. Days passed, and each one felt like an eternity. She couldn't stay in that hospital room, hidden from the world. She had a life to reclaim, a life that had been stolen from her. But more than that, she had a reckoning to face. Charles had stolen her life, her safety, her dignity, and now she would face him. Not as the woman he buried in the woods, but as the woman who had come back to take control. She stood at the edge of the street, staring at the house. The house where she had lived, once, with him. It was a house she thought of as home, a home that now felt like a prison. Rebecca hadn't told anyone where she was going. She had no intention of asking for anyone's permission. No police, no detectives, no outside interference. This was her fight now. She had heard about Charles's new life. The new wife, the business booming, the public appearances, the smooth talk. He had kept on living, unpunished. But that was about to change. The front door of the house was still the same, solid wood, familiar, but now it was foreign to her, a symbol of the life she had once hoped for. She could almost hear Charles's laughter echoing through the house, the same laugh that used to comfort her, now tainted by betrayal. Her heart was pounding, but she held her breath. This moment was hers. And Charles, for the first time in years, would have to face the truth. Rebecca's fist closed around the doorbell. The sound it made seemed to reverberate through her chest, each chime like the ticking of a clock counting down the last moments of Charles's carefully constructed life. She could feel her pulse quicken, but she remained calm. She wasn't the woman he had left for dead. She wasn't the victim anymore. She had taken back her life. And now she would take back her truth. The door opened slowly, and there he stood, Charles. His face paled as soon as his eyes met hers, and his expression shifted in an instant from casual politeness to shock, disbelief, then fear. It was like the floor had dropped from beneath him. His gaze darted around, searching for an escape, but there was nowhere to run. Not this time. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the years between them hung in the air. Charles looked at her as though she were a ghost, his eyes wide with panic. His fingers twitched, but he didn't move. He didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do. He had buried her. He had thought she was gone. But there she was, standing in front of him, alive. And she was not the same woman who had once loved him. Rebecca took a slow, deliberate step forward. She stood her ground, looking at him with a quiet intensity. This wasn't about anger. This wasn't about getting back at him. It was about one question. One moment of clarity, for both of them. Why? The word hung in the air, sharp and still. It was simple. But it was everything. Why had he done it? Why had he destroyed her, shattered everything they had built together, and buried her in that cold, unforgiving earth? Charles opened his mouth, but no words came out. He stepped back, his hand gripping the doorframe like a lifeline. I didn't, no, Rebecca cut him off, her voice steady, firm. Don't you dare lie to me. You thought I was dead. You thought you could just get away with it. But you're wrong. I'm here, and you're going to face what you did. His eyes flickered with panic, and his face twisted as if he were searching for an excuse, a way out. His facade of charm and control crumbled before her. This was no longer the man who had promised her the world. This was the man who had betrayed her, the man who had thought he could erase her. Rebecca didn't wait for him to speak again. She knew there was no justification. No more lies. Behind her, the sound of sirens began to grow louder. Charles's eyes widened, and in that moment, he knew. He couldn't charm his way out of this. He had nowhere to hide. Rebecca took one last look at him, her gaze unflinching, unwavering. You can't run anymore, Charles. The truth is here, and it's not going anywhere. Charles stood there, frozen. His breath was shallow, his mind racing, but it didn't matter. It was over. The truth had come for him. Rebecca turned and walked away, but she didn't look back. She had taken back control, and for the first time in years, she felt free. Rebecca stood in silence as Charles was led away in handcuffs, his eyes avoiding hers. The police had taken him, but even with justice served, the scars lingered, both the ones on her body and the ones buried deep in her heart. She had survived. She had taken back control. But as she watched him disappear into the squad car, a bitter weight settled in her chest. Victory didn't feel like freedom. It felt like a heavy reminder of everything she had lost. Can she ever forgive herself for staying so long? The question haunted her as she turned away, the sounds of the city around her fading. Can she ever truly heal from the damage he caused? Or was the scar permanent? The past would never let her go, but the future? That was hers to reclaim.